rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai rai rai. Yai rai 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 rai. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. We gather this afternoon at a time for losing and a time for remembering, for wailing, for celebrating, and a time for comfort. We gather to bid farewell to Chanan, Dayan. Thank you all for coming. I'm Rabbi Rick Brody, the Baskin Jewish Community Chaplain at Jewish Family Service of Colorado. It's an honor to have been involved with Chanan and his family for the past couple of months. I had the pleasure of meeting with Chanan, and it was a pleasure, on 4 occasions since this past October, most recently last Thursday evening at his home with Kelly to guide him through the prayers for the end of life. I quickly learned firsthand of his, as was stated so accurately in his obituary, his quick wit and infectious humor, his unbridled positivity, and his deeply philosophical mind. And I've spent time this week with family members to prepare for this day, to learn more about Chanan and to help them fulfill their obligations to him through the burial that we have just completed and this funeral service. We have laid Chanan's body to rest earlier this afternoon at Fairmount Cemetery. We now take the time to praise his soul. I thank all of you for doing your part as well. Your presence here today, whether in person or watching the live stream, helps to sanctify Chanan's memory and provides comfort to his mourners. It's good of all of you to be with us. Chanan was born on March 22nd, 1954, the 17th of the month of Adar Bet in the year 5714 on the Hebrew calendar, on a kibbutz in Rehovot in the state of Israel. He died this past Tuesday, December 26th, 2023, the 14th of Tevet, 5784, at his and his beloved wife Kelly's home in Denver, Colorado. He was born Chanan Rubinov, the firstborn child of Hadassah and Yechiel Rubinov. A year later, younger sister Daphna was born. Not long thereafter, Dasi and Yechiel divorced, and Dasi partnered with Alfred Dayan. In 1958, Dasi and Alfred moved with 4-year-old Chanan to the United States, to the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California. The couple was married, and Alfred legally adopted Chanan, who was now being called by the English pronunciation of his name's spelling, thus becoming Chanan Dayan, as he was known for the rest of his life. The family moved around the valley several times, all within a few years of each other, residing in Sherman Oaks, Tarzana, and Woodland Hills. When Chanan was 8 years old, sister Lucy was born, and 2 years later, brother Leon arrived on the scene. Dossie worked as a secretary for a Formica company. They worked on the set for Star Trek, which Chanan became a big fan of. Alfred was an architect, and Chanan wished to follow in his footsteps, which he did in his own way by making a very successful career in the home building industry. He was really good at construction, a natural who taught himself how to do a lot of everything. Described by his family as a Renaissance man, Chanan also embraced Alfred's love for photography, which remained a lifelong hobby. In their house in Tarzana, his parents built a dark room for developing his own film and to encourage his passion. Chanan started at Grant High School, but graduated from Taft in 1972. In high school, Chanan sang in a doo-wop group. He also caved to his PE teacher's pressure to join the wrestling team, even though he was a pacifist. Good friends at this time were Leonard Wilson, whom Chanan met through Boy Scouts, and Garth, a high school friend. Chanan enrolled at Valley Junior College, but school really wasn't for him. An additional obstacle was a horrific trauma that occurred when skeet shooting at age 19 with a friend who dropped his gun, or as Chanan described the story, tried to shoot his hat off his head and shot Chanan in the neck, barely missing his spinal cord, but still causing significant damage to Chanan's use of and feeling in his hands. During his time recovering, and he never fully regained complete sensitivity in his hands, during his recovery, he read the classics, improving his vocabulary in ways that would serve him extremely well later on in life during his fiercely competitive Scrabble games at which he was masterful. Leaving school behind, Chanan entered the workforce, working for Alfred in project management for about 12 years. He was then hired by the architecture firm Goldrich and Kest, where he worked for a few years in his 30s. He then served as a consultant and then as a vice president, and was then hired as a vice president for purchasing for a few other builders, developing his expertise in negotiations, lots of haggling for labor, for equipment, and for building materials. Chanan had a good friend, Freddie Branning, and wound up marrying Freddie's sister. This first marriage lasted about 6 years, from the late 70s into the early 80s. From this marriage, Chanan's first 2 children were born, his son Adam, of blessed memory, in 1980, and his son Joshua in 1981. Chanan and his children maintained a good relationship with Freddie and with sister-in-law Eileen and her husband, Frank Martorella. In the late 80s, Chanan married his second wife, Robin. Their son Daniel was born in 1988, and their daughter Anna was born in 1991. A major life-changing incident occurred around 1987 when Adam, age 7, fell through a drop ceiling and suffered a traumatic brain injury that triggered epilepsy. The numerous seizures that followed left Adam mentally disabled and very dependent. He needed significant care, including many surgeries, for the rest of his life. Chanan was very involved in caretaking for his son and struggled regularly with whether or not each decision he made for Adam was the right one. In 1993, the family moved to Conifer, Colorado for a new work opportunity for Chanan. He served as a purchasing manufacturer for a low-income subsidized housing builder that served the entire country, meaning that Chanan was away a lot of the time, traveling for work. After a few years with this company, Chanan shifted to the same work with several different local companies, ultimately setting into an excellent working relationship with Dirk Holmes, where unfortunately he was only able to work for a couple of years before he got sick. When the family arrived in Colorado, they joined Congregation Beth Evergreen, where in time Chanan became very involved for several years. The rabbi at the time was my current mentor, Rabbi Elliot Baskin, who served in addition to Congregation Beth Evergreen as their rabbi in the position that I now hold, which currently bears his family's name, as I am the Baskin Jewish Community Chaplain. Rabbi Baskin is here today, and it's an honor to have him with us. In the past few weeks, Chanan asked to be reconnected with folks from Beth Evergreen. I reached out to my colleague to let him know that Chanan asked about him and wished for him to be present here today. And Chanan reconnected with several members of the congregation whom he had lost touch with, which was very meaningful for him. And I believe some of those people are here today. His membership at CBE was the first time in his life that he was the member of a synagogue. The experience intensified his pride in being Jewish. He did learn recently, thanks to a 23andMe test, that he is 100% Ashkenazi Jewish, and that confirmation of the purity of his genetic Jewishness was a source of great pride for him as well. The children attended religious school there, and Josh had his bar mitzvah there in 1994. Shortly after joining, Chanan discovered that a member of the congregation had a connection to Chanan's biological father, Yechiel. That member reconnected father and son, who had been estranged for decades. And Yechiel came to Colorado for Josh's bar mitzvah. Later, he invited Chanan to visit in Israel, which Chanan did, and he had the opportunity to travel the country and to meet his sister Daphna. After Chanan's first employer in Colorado folded, during his work transition, he decided to get more active as a leader at Beth Evergreen. He became a vice president on the board and was instrumental in helping the congregation construct its own synagogue building, bringing all his professional expertise to the project, an accomplishment he was very proud of, and which the community still benefits from today in their thriving and beautiful synagogue structure in the foothills of the Rockies. Chanan's marriage to Robin ended in the late 90s. He then moved to Evergreen, lived there for a time, and then moved around based on the different jobs he took, living in Castle Rock for a few years, where he met his good friend Val, William Valentine, who's here today with his wife Sharon. Chanan was then living in Aurora, and in 2007, he met Kelly Whetstone on eHarmony. They hit it off right away. Kelly fell in love with Chanan's propensity for tall tales. One of the prompts in their early dating site mediated communication was, "What was the last book you read?" Chanan wrote a long dissertation about a tale of a Japanese warrior and a series of adventures. And after paragraphs summarizing this epic, he concluded with, "Oh, I just made all that up. I only read boring work manuals." The couple's first date was October of 2007 at Dave & Buster's on Colorado Boulevard, where they sat and talked for 3 to 4 hours. They were together ever since. In June of 2008, Chanan took a job with Beazer Homes in Las Vegas. In September of that year, Kelly joined him in Vegas. They were wed on November 21st, 2008 at A Hollywood Chapel in Las Vegas, In a short ceremony attended by Val and Sharon, and Dave and Emma, friends they had met in Vegas who were cousins of Kelly's sister-in-law. And then they partied all night at the Venetian Hotel. The couple stayed in Vegas for 2.5 years, and then Chanan was transferred to Phoenix, where they lasted about a year, ultimately moving back to Kelly's house in Denver in 2012. Chanan began working with Dirk at the end of 2016 and became a mentor to younger staff. He was honored in 2018 with an award for excellence as Purchasing Professional of the Year through a Home Builders Association in Denver, in celebration of his very advanced Excel design for buyers to use at the sales office for picking options for their homes. Chanan was a master with spreadsheets, a gift that he has passed down to his daughter, Anna. This efficient streamlining process improved efficiency for the company and saved them possibly $1 million. 2018 was also when Chanan got sick, ultimately getting diagnosed with scleroderma, a rare, uncurable, systematic autoimmune disease. In 2019, he went on disability. Dirk was extremely helpful for him. Kelly said she was in touch with Chanan's boss from there recently, and he told her he thinks of Chanan often, and that, quote, "The best decision I've made in my career was hiring Chanan Dayan." Another setback was in 2020 when Adam got a really bad fever, suffered another seizure, and died from a heart attack. May his memory always be a blessing. In the last few years, Chanan held on with his inimitable positivity, but the disease wore him down and caught up with him, and other various complications emerged, ultimately leading to the decision to enter into hospice care and to die peacefully at home. Chanan is mourned and remembered by the following family members: his sister in Israel, Daphna ben Amitai, and Daphna's son, Adam; his sister in California, Lucy Bordona, and Lucy's 3 daughters, Alex, Katie, and Sarah; his brother, Leon Dayan, Leon's wife, Deborah Lewis, who are here today from Washington, D.C. We also recognize Leon and Deborah's children, Becky, who's in D.C., and Levy in Chicago. And we note Chanan's children, his son, Adam, of blessed memory, his son, Joshua Dayan, who is on his way to Colorado, but unable to make it in time for today's ceremonies; Daniel Dayan, and Daniel's 2 children, Chanan's grandchildren, Isaac and Ellie; Chanan's daughter, Anna Dayan, and her partner, Donnie Schmidt; and Chanan's wife, Kelly Whetstone. We also acknowledge Kelly's son, Jared Whetstone, in Illinois; Kelly's brother and sister-in-law, Steve and Susan Struna, in Florida; Kelly's mountain relatives who are here today from Buena Vista; Val and his wife, Sharon; other good friends, Mike Toplansky and Rick Colombo, who I believe are here today; members from Congregation Beth Evergreen, and the beloved family Bijan, Gracie, who was a source of love and comfort and support for Chanan over the years, and particularly in his final days He had spent many weeks away from home before making the decision to choose hospice. He really wanted to come home. And he told Kelly, "I miss you." And then he added in his beloved, humorous way, but also perhaps telling the truth, "I miss Gracie more." All of us gathered today, live, in person, or on the stream, are here to support the next of kin mourners and their families as they fulfill the mitzvah, the sacred obligation to provide a dignified memorial, having already completed a dignified burial for their husband, brother, father, grandfather. We have returned Chanan's body to the earth from which we all come, an act of chesed shel emet, a kindness of pure truth that cannot be repaid by the deceased, and was thus performed with complete selflessness and love. And we now embellish that mitzvah with our ceremony here. So we recognize and thank everyone for coming, for viewing, to pay tribute to Chanan's life and to support his mourners at this difficult time. We're all playing a sacred role in the mitzvah of kavod hamet, the honoring of the deceased, which we will fulfill not only by having heard what I intended to be mostly a biographical sketch of just the facts, but the fact is that any account of Chanan's life, it cannot be free from a cold, sterile recitation of facts. His entire life was lived with poetry and character. I tried to stick mostly to a narrative timeline, but we will hear shortly from those who knew him and loved him most, and will fulfill that idea of honoring the deceased as they speak kindly about his life, reflecting lovingly on his joys, his passions, his virtues, his character, his accomplishments, and his loving devotion to his family, thus expressing gratitude for his presence on this earth for the past too short 69 years. We do all of this today with appreciation for the memories Chanan crafted for us, with relief knowing he died peacefully and free of suffering, and with sadness that his journey among the living and his ability to fashion new memories going forward has come to its end. Yet, knowing that his legacy will endure in so many ways, and that his memory will be a blessing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, some bitter, some sweet. We continue our service with the recitation of some psalms and prayers, thus linking Chanan's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. From Psalm 15. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai mi yagor b'ohalecha, mi yishkon b'har kodshecha. A Psalm of David. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity. Do what is right. Speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue. Do no evil to others. Do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere the Eternal One. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own. Then shall you stand firm forever. Kas polo natan beneshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach. Aseh eleh, lo yimot leolam. From Psalm 34. Lechuvanim shimuli, Yirat Adonai alamedchem. Come, my children, and listen carefully. You will learn what it means to revere the Eternal One. Who is eager for life? Who desires years of good fortune? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek amity and pursue it. Sur merav aseh tov, bakesh shalom v'rodfehu. The 23rd Psalm. I'll start by reciting it in English. If you know it, I invite you to join with me. I'll then chant it in Hebrew. A Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar. Bihinot deshe yarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshoveh, nafshi yeshoveh, yancheni v'magle tzedek, leman shemo. Gam ki elech begetz al mavet, lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha, Shivtecha umishantecha, Hema yenachamuni, Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan, Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan, Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan, Neged sorera. Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Dishanta vashemen roshi, Kosi revaya, Ach tov vachesed, Yirdefuni, Kol yemei chaya, v'shavti beveit Adonai, v'shavti beveit Adonai, leorech yami. Yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai dai dai, yadadai dai 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 dai, yadadai. Yai dai dai dai, yai dai dai dai, yai dai 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 dai. We now have the honor, the privilege, the pleasure of hearing eulogies from a close friend and multiple family members. First want to invite up William Valentine. Come forward. Is Val here? There he is. Okay.
This is really beautiful to have everyone that loved Chanan and knew him to be gathered today. It's touched my heart. The hardest thing for me is going to be keeping a straight face while I'm talking here. I have been stressing about coming up here and trying to summarize my friend's life and our relationship in a matter of a short window. And thought to myself, well, no, I'll think about some things. I'll write some points down. I'll go up there and I'll get these words when I come up to this podium. So as we were driving here, none of that was coming to truth. Now I'm feeling like I was going to get a heart attack and have to join him. And we pulled up to the wrong place, which is just as iconic as it can get. And of course, this is a big insurmountable pressure. This is the death of my dearest friend. This moment was just huge. I had made it so big. And every time I kept thinking about what am I going to say? What am I going to say? I draw a bigger blank, like I'm staring at a big blank wall. I'm sure we've all been there. And so I'm driving along. We barely made it to be on time. And it's the wrong place. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is horrible. I still don't know what to say. And now we're late for getting where we need to be. And luckily I heard that things were a little bit late. And I text Kelly and I said, Kelly, we went to the wrong place. And that's when Chanan came into the picture, because that is what made him so special. And speaking through Kelly, she texts me back, we went to the wrong place too. And I thought, I laughed real hard, because I knew at that moment Chanan was in my heart and was giving me the words to open up with, which is always the hardest part. And I don't know exactly what he would have said, but what I was laughing so hard about is that this was as close to being late to his own funeral as he could possibly be. And I thought, man, that's still him. That is the most beautiful thing. And I can't thank you enough for texting me with that. And I felt at peace at that moment that whatever I was going to say was going to come out. The ceremony has been absolutely beautiful. And Rabbi, you have sung with your heart and performed this with such heartfelt truth and purity that it was just beautiful to be a part of this. And some of the things that I was thinking about was how I met Chanan. And that kind of brings the rest of this piece together. Chanan and I met through a friend of ours that, you know, we had a good time with, but he brings us together because there was a party happening. So we go down to this party, me, Mike Toplansky, and Rick Colombo is the one that introduced us to all these people. And Chanan and I and Mike all met at the same time. And there was something really magical about all of that, because in our lives, there's like puzzle pieces. There's so many pieces to our lives and how things come together and what we're learning and what we're drawing from others and strengths we draw from others. And not everybody is a puzzle piece, you know, in your life. You'll meet a lot of people, and a lot of them will be very dear to you, but there are certain ones that will play a dear part of your life and be a piece of that puzzle that you were missing. And Chanan recognized that immediately, just like I did and just like Mike did, that we were all a piece of our lives puzzle, even though we hadn't even been with each other but a few hours. Chanan very quickly deemed us in the later days as the three amigos, which made our other friend really upset, because he's like, why am I not one of the amigos? Be quiet. You're the fourth musketeer. You know, it's just, you know, but those pieces of that puzzle, there were three very different people that got together. Different views, different beliefs, different ways of approaching things. And for me, it was one of the only two single guys, because Chanan was single and Mike was single, and I was married with two wonderful children, which often doesn't mix with single men. And, but we all had different viewpoints on things and different views on life. And the beauty about it was that we were all able to listen to each other. We could all talk like we all can, but we were actually able to bring these different viewpoints to one another and listen and make those new viewpoints become a part of our lives and awaken us to better insight. And that was wonderful. And at the time, you know, we're all pursuing our careers. We're all going down those lines, but things were very unfocused for us as well at times. We were all just so career bound that our personal lives were a little scattered and unfocused. And there was the beauty that I saw of Chanan, who had a keen eye. He had a keen eye, as was talked about today. He could see the beauty and the humor in life like no one. And he would sit there and, I mean, he could do photography, which takes not only a real keen eye, but a beautiful insight at what you're looking at. His humor was spot on. He was the wittiest man up until the last days of his life. He was just as witty as he always was, just laughed at everything. And those are the things that made him so strong. I don't even remember the punchlines. I wish I could have, because there were times that I remember when we're sitting in the hospital with him in just the last days. He's talking about, okay, this is the plan. This is what's going to happen. You know, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that, blah, blah. And my arm, they've got this great plan now. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. And basically, they've figured out a way that long after I've passed, it will heal. And he just had humor about everything. I can't even remember the punchline when we were changing these god awful pants that he had on, that Kelly's like, oh my God, this fashion wreck. And she says, you know, we've got to lift him up. So I'm holding him there. And this, you know, stretched him out quite a bit. And Kelly's down there trying to get his pants on. And he lets a big wind at that point in time, right while she's down there. And she looks up, Chanan, couldn't you have waited? And I don't even remember the punchline, but he had us laughing so hard because he had no problem at seeing the light and the humor. And mostly, I think that everyone here knows that he could take those insurmountable, huge things in our lives that we make to be our mountains about whatever. It could be about friends, work, weather, it doesn't even matter. And he had such a keen eye about that he could take those magical things that we are just blowing up, find the humor in it, bring it down to earth, and make it something that we had no problem conquering at that moment. And those were some of the characteristics. And like I said, even in everything that he said and everything he was doing, right up to the end, he had no way of finding less than that and less than the brightness that he could see even in the darkest moments. But there was always that one piece of puzzle he was missing. And this was because we were young and a little scattered in what we were doing. And in 2007, he bravely got online and found himself the most amazing woman that I've ever met. This small little petite firecracker that had her own little way of doing things and loved punk rock. And it was everything exciting to Chanan that there could possibly be. And I got to tell you, it changed him because that piece of the puzzle that he was missing was now there. And it was like you just took a toy and put new batteries in it. And he was charged and excited. And he used to always tell me, you know, I don't know why she's hanging out with me, but whatever she wants, I'm going to give her, because he knew how special that was. And Mike, the other three amigo, would always be like, he dated many girls and was scattered with that himself. And he could never understand why Chanan was so happy all the time. He always thought that there was dark things that he just wouldn't talk about. And it's like, no dark things, no dark things, just all brightness and nothing that he couldn't cross or defeat ever. And he knew that. So that's what he did to me in my life. That's what he did to everyone that I know in their lives that knew him. And those are the things that I am going to miss. But I have to tell you, there's another thing he did that was very special. And that was that Chanan was about completion. He was a very deep thinker, very philosophical, and very intense. This is why I liked him. And in the time that he figured out that he was sick and that things weren't going to go well, he reflected back on his life. And this is something that I want all of you to think about, because these are things that we can take from Chanan that he has given us and bring them forth in today's life. Chanan looked at his life and looked at all the people that were in his life at one time or another. And like so many of us, we have relationships that were big parts of our lives with people. Maybe you were married, maybe you were good friends, maybe you went through amazing times together, maybe you worked together, something. But a lot of those relationships in our lives, they either dissipate and just communication dissipates and the friendships dissipate and the relationships dissipate, or there was some sort of a disagreement or an unfinished end that left something unfinished. Chanan had that time, like most of us may not, to reflect on that and pull everybody back in his life and reconcile and reconnect would be a better word for those friendships and those people. It was like a bad TV show. He just went through every single one of his friends and every single person, including the synagogue that he started and all the people in that and people he hadn't seen in years and years and years. And it was so beautiful to watch that. And he actually got through all of it. I don't know of any that he did not reconnect with. And that's something that we may not get the chance. And I've already started. I've already taken those words of wisdom and made them effective in my life. I drove the other day and I heard a song after talking to Chanan, amazingly enough. And I heard a song that my phone had played up. And I used to own recording companies and do a lot of bands and music and things like that. And one of the groups that spent a lot of time with me in the studio, we had kind of fallen apart at one point in a not so great way because there was whatever happened. And I hear this song on the radio. I think of Chanan and the reconnection that he did with me. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to call this person. And I have a date with them to go to brunch on Sunday. And I just want to urge to all of you that the things that I carry most with my relationship with Chanan is not to make anything so big that you can't pass it, to not make anything out of proportion in our lives, because the journey and our friends, that is the life. That is the story. And he has some of the best friends and the best family because of who he was. And I urge you to take that humor and take that enlightenment that he's given all of us and utilize it in your own world. Find those people that were parts of your life and reconnect with them. Remember the good things that all of us have left each other. You may have had a previous marriage. look back at that marriage and remember there was something in it that made it so strong and great while it happened. Maybe it didn't end well. Same thing with friendships. Find that moment where you were friends for a reason and try to remember all those good things. That will enlighten all of our lives. And try to take what he's given us and use it while we're still alive and healthy and can actually enjoy the fruits of that labor. Now I'll let the family members who will crush what I said, because they have a lot more to say and a lot more beautiful things that I have kept out of this over 5-minute talk. And I just want to thank you all for being a part of his life. And wow, you're amazing, Kelly. You're amazing. And your wedding was amazing. It was amazing. And I thank you and your family for letting me be a part of your lives. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that wise, thoughtful, loving reflection and charge to all of us for how to go forward and to carry the lessons, the wisdom, the model of Chanan's life. We're going to continue to hear about ways that we can all still be impacted by Chanan and ways that he has had an impact on those closest with him. So I want to invite up his brother Leon, who's going to share some family reflections that include those from their sister Lucy as well.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm Chanan's little brother, Leon. Chanan was 9 years older than me and 8 years older than my sister Lucy. And Chanan was one of the great blessings of my childhood and of my life since. And my sister Lucy, who can't be here today because of an injury she recently suffered that prevents her from traveling, told me last night that she would say the same thing. When Lucy and I were born, my father was attending college in his late 20s and he was working part-time in addition to being a full-time student. And my mother was working too back then. So while it might not have been in accord with the prevailing parenting standards, even of the sort of loose 60s, and it would certainly seem strange today in the era of helicopter parents, there were fairly long periods of time during the day when my sister and I were toddlers, and my 11 or 12-year-old brother, Chanan, was the only one in charge of us. And he managed to be both responsible in keeping an eye on us and also be just a whole lot of fun. Lucy recalls that there was a really awful neighborhood bully who was picking on her on the sidewalk when she was very young. And Chanan came out and confronted the bully by picking up Lucy and telling her to kick him. And the bully ran away. Excellent problem solving. But I think more remarkable than taking on babysitting responsibilities, which he was forced to do, was that when he was a teenager with an actual life, lots of friends, an occasional girlfriend. So he had a real, teenager's life. And I was just a little 8 or 9-year-old, little pisher. And Chanan chose of his own free will to find long stretches of time just to hang with me. He'd often hit me fungos for hours at a time near my golf course that no one ever seemed to use in order to help me improve my baseball skills. And we would just be out there and having a good time, and it stretched on for hours until the sun set. I took that for granted as a little boy. And only later as an adult did I realize how unusual that was, because when I was a teenager, I'm being honest with you, I would not have spent a significant amount of time with someone 9 years younger than me. I wouldn't have known what I could get out of that. But with Chanan, he just was that unselfish with his time. And I learned only yesterday from talking to Lucy that he spent similar long stretches of time with her. She told me that it was not my mom who taught her how to bake cakes and make omelets. It was Chanan who did that. She said that Chanan was endlessly patient with her. He loved to cook. And he was endlessly patient with her, even after an incident in which she spattered the cake batter all over the kitchen walls and the cabinets because she was having difficulty managing the electric mixer. And she said that, you know, he, for no, you know, just being a good big brother, would spend that time with her. And, you know, children of a later generation learn that phrase, time out for bad behavior. But Lucy and I benefited from just endless time in with Chanan. There was an incident that the rabbi alluded to. That's hard to discuss still. But it was the most jarring and frightening day of my childhood, which was, I believe, was a few days after Halloween in 1972, when Chanan was 18 and I was 9. My mom took a phone call from a hospital in Saugus, which was then a very small and mostly rural town, way out north of Los Angeles. And Chanan was in the emergency room because he'd been shot through the neck at close range by a friend of his with a skeet, you know, in a skeet shooting accident. And the bullet went all the way through his neck and exited his body. And the first night, there was a chance that he wouldn't survive. And then after he stabilized, the report was that the bullet had missed his spine, you know, sparing him from like permanent paralysis, but nevertheless causing serious neurological damage that would require, you know, multiple surgeries to mitigate, followed by at least a year of intense physical therapy so he could regain most of his fine motor skills. And that was like the scariest day. I'll collect myself in a second. But the best day, this is the easier part, was that he came home from the hospital in time for Thanksgiving. And it became sort of a family tradition of Thanksgiving that the first thing we would think about being thankful for was Chanan. So even to this day, that was, gosh, we could do the math. That was almost 50 years ago, more than 50 years ago. Even now, when I think Thanksgiving, automatically I think thankful for Chanan. It's also been referenced that he had a lot of artistic talent. And he was a very gifted photographer. We would go on family trips and there were never any pictures of him because he was always the one taking the photos. And I think he was happy to sort of not be the center of attention. And he learned how to take, I don't know, I think he did a lot of things he did in life. He took a little bit of a lesson and then taught himself the rest. So I think he took like the standard LA Unified School District photography class, but then went way beyond that. This was, of course, before the era of digital photography. And I think, you know, and that if people as old as me will remember that color film wasn't cheap either. So we'd go on the trip and my mom and dad would give him like a roll a day. And you know, so he had to be careful because each exposure was valuable. And I really envied his ability. To this day, I don't even really try that hard because I'm like, I know I can never get it because I look through the camera lens and I just see visual overload. And Chanan would just, you know, Chanan just walks through life, whether he has a camera over his shoulder or not, seeing, you know, connected patterns, lines, curves, angles, things that parallel one another. So he knew when it was worth taking that picture. And when the pictures came back from the developer or were developed by him, as the rabbi mentioned, he did have, in one of the houses we lived in, he had a dark room. And he would develop the pictures himself sometimes. So we'd get back those rolls of film from the trip, and there was always just an extraordinarily high proportion of keepers to duds. And at one point, I would like to sort of get all of those old classic photographs from when he was like a teenager in his early 20s from those trips, and put them all together because it was really a gift that he had. He had a more eccentric art form too. which was pumpkin carving. I don't know. He looked forward, he spent a lot of time every Halloween carving pumpkins. And he wouldn't just carve those like, the jack-o'-lantern with the big circle and the triangle for the nose. He did these nuanced, it's hard to even describe. He would like carve the surface, like bas relief art, like sculpt the surface of it with different thicknesses and textures so that when it lit up, it would look very much like a real portrait or a landscape, but always in orange, the color that you're stuck with when you're doing pumpkin art. And he took it very seriously. And I think I noticed that he put more time into the planning and execution of those pumpkins than the amount of time that the pumpkin would last before rotting. And I once asked him why he did that. And he said, well, he said he thought that art was more pure when it was in a transient form. And I'm sure there was a lot of truth to that. But I also suspect that pumpkin carving time was also sort of his yearly reminder that he had worked so hard after that shooting accident to get back those fine motor skills, that this was his way of reminding himself that he could do that and that he had sort of triumphed over that. Oh boy. He wasn't just a good brother to his siblings, he was a very devoted son. And he was particularly devoted to my mother, Dossie, known as the Duck, as the rabbi said, or Ducky. And she was, I think he inherited a lot of her best traits. She was endlessly loving, forgiving, accepting. And I've gotten this far without talking about a sense of humor, which was covered very well just before me here. But I will say that it was central to who he was. And he joked about everything. It didn't matter how delicate the topic was. And many years ago, back in the 1990s, when my mother's own health was failing badly, Chanan spent an extraordinary amount of time tending to her, doing various errands for her, and sometimes driving her places when she was too ill to drive herself. And in the midst of all of this, he joked with me. He said he'd figured out what his epitaph was going to be. 2 words: Atlas schlepped. And this was classic Chanan humor, funny, irreverent, not at all malicious, but also grounded in truth. At that time, Chanan was like Atlas. He was already carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was working for you heard about his career. This was a time in his life when he was working for a pretty demanding and not terribly generous boss, and he was helping to raise a family in that period after Adam's terrible injury. So Chanan was doing all of this, and he nevertheless sort of voluntarily chose to live near my mom and keep an eye on her the way that he kept an eye on it. That's when we were, young, because he knew that she needed him. So he was a great son to her. And I'll conclude. Well, I have a little bit here, but yeah, he when he was first diagnosed with this scleroderma, he explained to me, this awful way that disease progresses, which it slowly constricts your skin first, but then it sort of attacks your internal organs, your lungs, until the body eventually gives out. And every time I called in to check on him, he would work in a joke, no matter what pain he was feeling. And I think this was his way of saying that the disease could do a lot of damage, but it couldn't take away his sense of humor or his spirit. So on behalf of my sister and myself, we just want to say that we'll always be thankful for Chanan, and we'll miss spending time with him, but his spirit will be in our lives forever.
Thank you, Leon. We're now going to hear from Chanan's children. First, invite up Anna.
I was hoping that I wouldn't be falling apart during this, but I might start that way because that was beautiful, Uncle Leon. Thank you. As we are all here together sharing stories about my father, I can see the impact he had on so many lives. I can say with certainty he would have loved that we're all here, that we're all together, and that he gets to be the center of attention. Through this process, I've been struggling to pick one memory, to weave a touching tale of my father and his influence on me. So I'd like to share with you all some things that I've learned from my dad instead. I've learned that even the most manly, strong, and stoic fathers will still cry watching the animated Tarzan movie. That the best chicken soup recipe is and always will be my Grandma Ducky's. I learned that a long drive with great music can inspire so much, and every steering wheel could be used as a drum kit or an air guitar if the song was good enough. I learned that even if my art wasn't perfect or even very good at all, my dad would find beauty, mastery, a deeper evocative meaning, and he would always encourage me to keep creating. I learned that my dad could mimic every sound effect, droid, or alien in Star Wars, and he would proudly do so even if we didn't ask him to. I learned that having a big nose was a sign of true power, and the fact that he had the biggest nose was a testament to that, and absolutely not something that he made up. I learned that you can do your best and still fail, but as long as you keep going, you'll always succeed. I learned that everything can be turned into a burrito if you try hard enough. Even leftover spaghetti. I also learned that ice cream could be used as a breakfast food as long as you put cereal on it for fiber. I learned that you could take the driver from LA, but you could never take the LA out of the driver. I learned that no matter how dark things may seem, there's always a joke in there to tether to and keep yourself afloat. There's always a light to find in every situation and a laugh to gift to anyone who seems like they might need it. And my dad taught me all of that. That was his way. At the end of my dad's life, each time I saw him, he was humming My Way by Frank Sinatra. And now the end is here. And so I face that final curtain. My friend, I'll make it clear. I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I traveled each and every highway. And more, much more I did. I did it my way. It figures my dad would have the Frank Sinatra playing him off. But I realized it was one more lesson I hope we can all learn from him. That even though my dad's time had come earlier than any of us wanted it to, he lived a full life with few regrets. He followed his heart and his truth, and he lived it all his way. And I know as his daughter, I will continue his legacy by living the way that he taught me, by living my way as well. Thank you all for coming.
Beautiful, Anna. Thank you. We'll now hear from Chanan's son, Daniel.
So I'll stand up a step. Thank you all for gathering today to celebrate the life of my extraordinary father. As we share memories, one of the earliest funny moments in memory brings a smile to my face. I was taking a shower and I didn't bring a bath towel, so I asked him for a bath towel. Instead of the expected towel, he handed me a tissue. His sense of humor turned a simple request into a scene of laughter that I'll forever cherish. That's my dad. Always finding the punchline in the ordinary, making even the simplest moments unforgettable. We would have sock fights, rubber band fights all around the house, turning the ordinary day into playful escapades. His ability to infuse joy to the mundane was a hallmark of his character. Another memory that resonates is the way he taught me to navigate through the worst of traffic. His colorful commentary, often accompanied by a hearty putz, turning what could have been a stressful experience into a comical adventure. The gift of humor is a life skill that no one could have taught me better. It's a skill that I'll use my entire life, a tool to find joy in the hardest of times. His guidance extends beyond the roads. He taught me resilience, patience, and the importance of laughter in navigating life's twists and turns. I want to take a moment to express my deep gratitude to his wife, Kelly, who stood by him till the end. Her unwavering support and large heart were a source of strength for my father, and her presence was comforting and a constant in his life. To all of you who gathered here today, and those who could not be with us, thank you. Your presence is a testament to the impact my father had on our lives and those around him. Our shared memories, laughter, and support mean the world to our family during this difficult time. A devoted father of 4, a loving grandfather of 2, he leaves behind a legacy of love, laughter, and an invaluable lesson in life. Today, let's celebrate the joy he brought to our lives and the incredible mark he left on each of us. In his honor, let's carry forward the lessons that he taught us, to find humor in the unexpected, to face challenges with resilience, and above all, to cherish the bonds of family that meant so much to him. Thank you for sharing these memories and honoring the man. That's my father.
Nothing more needs to be said. Each one of those eulogies could have stood on its own as a robust testament to so much of what Chanan gave to those he loved, to the world, and who he was. The totality of all those sentiments and the beautifully sentimental way in which each of you shared only elevates and sanctifies more deeply Chanan's life and his memory. Nothing more needs to be said, but Kelly wrote a little bit, and I'm going to finish with it, which I don't normally do, but in the same way that I could have pulled out pieces from any of your eulogies and said, that's the way to end. That's no, that one. That wraps it up. Kelly chose words that are also appropriate in that way. And even though nothing more else needs to be said, I'll pull privilege and just say a few things. I want to talk about Chanan's name. He was born in Israel. His Israeli identity was strong within him. Chanan, Dayan. Chanan comes from the root word chen, which means grace. So it could mean graceful one or gracious one, right? One who maybe receives grace graciously or who dispenses grace or is present and has awe in the presence of grace. I feel like all of those ways of spinning a name that has at its root grace, all of those apply to Chanan. He saw the grace in the poetry of life. He was graceful in his love for others. Anna didn't share directly, but had shared previously about how her father's affectionate nature grew over time. He became more able to dispense the grace of saying, I love you. And in keeping with the ability to cry at a Tarzan movie, to just become more vulnerable, more human, more open. And we've already heard, and I heard previously, how much there is a sense that his beautiful relationship with Kelly paved a way for him to open himself up even more to the grace all around him and to live gracefully. His last name, Dayan. Those who know Israeli history might, if they're thinking in that mode and hear the name Dayan, would think about the great General Moshe Dayan. Chanan was riveted to the TV in the last few months, deeply affected by the terrible situation of war that Israel is currently in. And he shared with me that he was spending hours watching the news. His heart was there. Like his namesake, Moshe Dayan, praying for the well-being of the state of Israel and the people of Israel. The meaning of Dayan is judge. Chanan's mourners, before we began this ceremony, engaged in the ancient act that pervades many cultures of expressing and experiencing grief by rending an article of clothing. The tearing that is done happens after the reciting of a blessing, which praises God as Dayan Ha'emet, the judge of truth. As we gathered to hold the enormity of loss of Chanan Dayan, we thought about the judge of the universe, the judge of truth, the one who sets all of this poetry into motion and whose decrees we have to accept. The idea of saying it at that moment is about affirming acceptance, that this reality is a decree that simply is. Chanan embodied that acceptance in his final months. Each time we spoke, and especially the final visit just days before he died, he had a sense of closure and a sense of peace, knowing that, as others have said, that he lived well, he made meaning of life, he loved, and he did his best. He accepted the judgment of the divine, and he was open to God's presence. He also acted like a judge, not judgmental. In fact, that too was a significant quality of his about how non-judgmental he was, accepting and loving and just open to the beauty and diversity of people, of life, of the world. What he was judicious, discerning. We've heard about his keen eye, his ability to spot beauty in nature, in humor, in moments, in people. He was judicious. And he acted with judgment in terms of justice, fairness, his kindness, and his honesty were traits that distinguished him. Kelly talked about how impressed she was with his professional dealings. The success in his career was so much about making deals, negotiating, haggling. And he cared about doing right by his company and saving them money, yet never at the expense of the dignity of the people with whom he was negotiating and making deals and contracts with. Some of the Psalms that I read earlier reflect that same idea. Deal justly with others. Be honest in your business undertakings. And he was. He was a judge of truth and of honesty and of fairness and of goodness in the way that he lived. He saw beauty in small things and in big things, as we've heard. He knew not to sweat the small stuff and to not make things big when they didn't need to be, as we heard. But he did like big things. He loved the Grand Canyon. He loved deserts. Anna surmised that she imagines that it was the colors, the way that they sweep together, the mystery of the vastness, the isolation at night, the poetry. Daniel mentioned that his love for the Grand Canyon was that he liked the architecture of it. Architecture writ large, crafted by the divine judge. He lived his life as a poem. He described himself poetically. Everything had a story. Picking up a napkin. Daniel said he thinks of his father as the last of the storytellers. And Anna mentioned that in terms of this dynamic relationship between small and large, seeing the poetry and the beauty in both, enjoying the vastness, being in awe of it, but knowing when to be small. And so Anna said he was humble with his accomplishments, and with minutia, he was grandiose. Found something no one else would have taken time with, and he turned it into a story, or just was drawn to the poetry of something that had caught his eye. And then, of course, in the presence of real grandiosity, like the Grand Canyon, he allowed himself to feel awe. So he liked architecture. He really liked Frank Lloyd Wright. A couple of Jewish guys wrote a song after Frank Lloyd Wright died. Simon and Garfunkel, probably just Paul Simon who wrote it, but the two of them sang it. And, we've heard from Frank Sinatra, but now we'll hear about Frank Lloyd Wright. I feel like this farewell is a fitting one for Chanan. So long, Frank Lloyd Wright. I can't believe your song is gone so soon. I barely learned the tune. So soon. So soon. I'll remember Frank Lloyd Wright. All of the nights we'd harmonize till dawn. I never laughed so long. So long. So long. Architects may come and architects may go, and never change your point of view. When I run dry, I'll stop a while and think of you. Chanan was an architect in so many metaphorical ways and worked with them indirectly in terms of building, and saw the architecture not only of grandiose beauty like the Grand Canyon, but just of life. The patterns, the way everything fit together. Val talked about the puzzle pieces coming together between friends. That's architecture. Chanan saw it all. And he changed our point of view. He had a unique one. Architects may come and architects may go, and never change your point of view. When I run dry, I'll stop a while and think of you. And of course, laugh. I never laughed so long, so long, so long. Architect, judge. He was not a priest of the ancient Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Where am I going with that? Architect, judge, priest. Of course he wasn't a priest, but he loved Star Trek. And Leonard Nimoy adopted the priestly hand sign. It's interesting to think about the damage that Chanan suffered to his hands, first from the shooting, and then decades later from the scleroderma. I don't know if he ever was able to make, was he still even while suffering? Amazing. Big difference. The different patterns and architecture of how we arrange our fingers, right? It could be a flipping off, like an LA driver, or it can be a sign of holiness, a sign of blessing, a wish for peace. Just in the matter of which fingers and which direction you arrange your hand and how you put those fingers together or not. Even that fact is so fitting for the detailed minutia and the poetry within it of the way Chanan lived his life. And it's too bad that his casket isn't here, but scheduling for today required that we do things in reverse. But of course, we know that he's here. And so I want to say to Chanan, live long and prosper. He will live long, eternally, so long, like Frank Lloyd Wright. He will live eternally in our memories. And finally, Kelly's words. Chanan Dayan was the love of my life. We were a couple of square pegs that somehow fit together. He was a kind, fair, and generous man, and I always admired that about him. Without his love and moral support, I would not be who or where I am today. Living with Chanan through his illness made me stronger than I ever thought I could be, and gave me a greater sense of compassion than I ever had before. And for that, among many other things, I am eternally grateful. My heart is breaking, and I miss him terribly. But through grief comes healing. I think this poem is fitting for all of us who share his loss. And so we end with another poem, and I agree, Kelly, this is a fitting way to end. I said, "What about my eyes?" He said, "Keep them on the road." I said, "What about my passion?" He said, "Keep it burning." I said, "What about my heart?" He said, "Tell me what you hold inside it." I said, "Pain and sorrow." He said, "Stay with it. The wound is the place where the light enters you." From the poet Rumi. The wound is the place where the light enters you. May we all receive that light in the midst of pain. May we carry the light that Chanan gave to the world, and may it shine on. That his memory always be a blessing. We now come to the El Malay Rachamim prayer. We recited it before leaving the cemetery. We recite it again now to bring closure to our focus on Chanan, on our having done right by him today, on having given him the proper burial and this beautiful fitting memorial. And we do so with this prayer that asks for God to care for Chanan's soul in its journey to eternity. If you are able, I invite you to rise as we all rise in spirit to receive these words of request for the care of Chanan's soul. El Malay Rachamim Shochen Bamromi Hamtze Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alot Kedoshim Utohorim Kazohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Chanan Ben Alfred V'Hadassa Shehalach Leolamo B'Gan Eden Tehemenuchato Anna Ba'al Harachamim Hastirehu Beseter Kenafecha Leolamim Utzror Bitzror HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'yanuach b'shalom Al Mishkavo V'nomar Amen. El Malay Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Chanan Dayan, who has gone to his eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our beloved Chanan find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May his soul rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. You may be seated. We now turn our focus from the kindness that we have bestowed upon Chanan through this act of memory, of memorializing and sanctifying his memory and his life. We now turn with more focus to our mourners. This is the moment where the shift occurs from the obligation to memorialize and to bestow these final kindnesses upon the one who is deceased, to the obligation to mourn, and for those of us gathered to console the bereaved. We make this transition even before the mourners take any steps forward. They will in a moment take a step in place, and they will rise, and we will rise to join them in supporting their recitation of the mourners' Kaddish, which is being distributed to the mourners right now. The Kaddish is an ancient Aramaic recitation that focuses on the greatness of the divine. It does not mention death. It is about life. It is about the eternal presence of the divine that we experience in life and in memory and in persevering, lessons that Chanan learned and taught to those he loved. His mourners will persevere, and they will use this prayer as a guide, as a crutch to lean on, to support them at this time that they need support, and we support them as well. These words are traditionally only recited in the presence of a minimum of 10 adult Jewish people, and our presence affirms for them that we are here for you, we love you, we comfort you. And as you say these words and we say amen to them and join in the places where, if you know to, I invite you to do so, we affirm to you, we comfort you, and we help you through this time of loss and grief. Mourners, please rise. All others, if it is your custom, I invite you to rise for us to support the mourners as they recite Kaddish Yatom, the mourners' Kaddish. Mourners, Yit Gadal v'Yit Gadash Shemei Rabbah. Amen. Bi'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'b'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru. Amen. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam ol almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudisha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Amen. May the one who makes peace in the heights make peace for us, for all the people Israel, and for all who dwell on earth. And we say, Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Please be seated. Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru imru. Amen. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. In a moment, we will depart from this place, and the mourners will take their first steps into their journey of mourning. We, their consolers, are going to gather in the aisle that's right here. So those of you who are over this section, in a moment, I'll ask you to come on over, and everyone besides the mourners, we're going to form two lines facing each other in that aisle. We're going to make a gauntlet, and it's our love on either side of it that are walls of support for our mourners who will walk through that gauntlet. And as they do, we are going to offer to them traditional Jewish words of comfort. Hamakom yenachem etchem betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. I'll prompt you with those words one by one, but first I'll tell you what they mean. Hamakom is a special euphemism referring to God. It literally means the place. The idea is that we open ourselves up to God's love and comfort and care in any place where we need it. God will be in that place. And as we leave this place and move to the next places, and everyone is invited back to Kelly and Chanan's home, in that place, mourners will find comfort. In the places in between, as they move through this journey of mourning, they will find comfort. So we ask that may God, the place, Hamakom, comfort you along with the remnant of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. We remember that our people has suffered loss and calamity, not only on the individual level, the way that we all suffer loss, and you mourners now enter into that millennia of history of other Jews who have mourned the loss of a loved one. You also enter into the great drama of our people who have suffered destruction, exile, and loss at a national level as a people, the destruction of our homeland, the destruction of our temple. As we remember one who helped to build a synagogue, we remember that God has comforted our ancestors, and that we remember those losses at this time, and we remember that the comfort that God has given in the past, God gives now. And as our people have arisen from the ashes, so too will you arise from this period of mourning as you receive divine support. And so we offer that support now. I invite all of us who are not the mourners, please come and form two lines right here, facing each other. Find a partner, find someone to stand across so that we have an equal number of people on each side. And that will be the length of our gauntlet. Yeah, you can maybe turn it, right? Shift it. All right, so there's a lane shifts left as we get towards the one who follow me, comforters, repeat after me. Hamakom. Yenachem. Etchem. Betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion Yerushalayim Hamakom Yenachem Etchem Betoch sha'ar avelei Tzion Yerushalayim. May the ever-present source of comfort grant comfort to you, along with remnant those who mourn.
I appreciate that. Thank you. They're beautiful. Yes, we should see them. Yes.